Well, the strike action by FlySafair pilots continues on day 2. The airline had issued an apology to its passengers facing disruptions following the cancellation of 26 of their flights. And joining us in studio is SABC News economics reporter Katlego Legodi, who has been following this story for us. So, Katlego, a great pleasure. Good afternoon. You've been busy up and down at the airport, and I'm wondering, is it really going to take 2 weeks for this, for these two warring sides to come to any solution? What is the latest, and what happened on day 2 of the strike action?
Well, a very good afternoon to you, Alicia, and to our viewers at home. Both parties are hoping that at least this strike can be brought to an end because none of them becomes a winner when there's a prolonged strike action, industrial action that we saw today getting into day 2. So what we know is that indeed we see a FlySafair operating on a skeletal, looking at the fact that there are pilots that have decided to withdraw their labor. And today, just walking into the airport, we took a different turn, and this time around went to Lanseria International Airport. And the reason why we went to Lanseria is because FlySafair is the only airline that more or less works there, that operates there at Lanseria. And we're hoping that at least when we get there, we'll get a sense of the impact in terms of all of these issues that are playing themselves out. Indeed, you heard from the CEO earlier on. I spoke to the CEO of the airport. He has been saying that indeed you get a sense that the impact is going to be dire if this strike action continues. All of them just looking at this meeting by the CCMA, the intervention to bridge an impasse. In terms of the losses, Lanseria just saying to us here, Alicia, that they are suffering around 20 to 30% of their flights that are not in operation. And they're saying that that points to the losses. You see the CEO even taking us back to the COVID-19 times to say today when he stepped into the facility and he looked at the board, it took him back to the days of COVID-19 when the airline was not doing well because of the pandemic. So he's saying that they're bound to counter their losses, but they're looking towards all of these processes to try and bring the parties together. What we know is that the CCMA has called the parties to come sit on the table again to try and bridge the impasse. This would happen under a section 150 of the Labour Relations Act that gives the CCMA the powers to then mediate and try by all means to bring the parties together. You can understand here, Alicia, that what is happening is not good for the economy, and there are frustrations on the ground. I mean, today one would have expected that because yesterday a lot of people could have gotten a sense of the fact that indeed there are disruptions to their flight. They will then step back or take alternatives and the likes. But most of them came to the airport to try by all means to see whether they can fly or not. Others, earlier on I spoke to a lady that was from Hartbeespoort, who basically is with her family and they're heading to Cape Town, and they were saying that they had to spend another night in Johannesburg, because they could not make it for their flight yesterday, and they're saying they had to pay extra 300 rand. So there are implications as well. This time around they decided as well that they're abandoning OR Tambo because the scene of OR Tambo yesterday would give you a sense that there is somewhat of an impact and the frustrations really palpable on the ground. But they were saying that today they decided to take a different turn and head to Lanseria. It was a bit quiet at Lanseria, compared to OR Tambo, and this is because you know very well that that airport does not have multiple of the airlines as alternatives. So other people could have decided that they're not, moving into going there to fly. Others have opted for alternatives. But one thing that we're picking up from the airline is that they're now working at expediting the refund process for those that were affected.
I mean, let's talk about that. You've just mentioned that, of course, you've just received word now that the company, which is FlySafair, is now willing to go and engage with, of course, the CCMA. What are some of the underlying issues that might not have been discussed in the previous process, Katlego, that will come out now and could be addressed? Because as we understand, FlySafair was very resolute on that they will not budge on the 10%, 10.5% demand. So what are you hearing in regards to that?
So we're hearing that both parties are willing to compromise in what would make sense for the both of them. Earlier on, speaking to Kirby Gordon as well, he gave us a sense that, what is happening is not what they would want in terms of a prolonged strike action, but they maintain the lockout. Remember that they've locked out the pilots.
The striking pilots.
And they're saying that that is because they're well within their rights. When the employees have decided that they're going to picket or demonstrate, then they'll exercise that. So they're still drawing the powers from the Labour Relations Act and what then they would enjoy coming from the CCMA. The CCMA, remember, it issued a certificate to strike for these workers, but that becomes the last resort, especially looking at the aviation industry and its importance to the country's economy. And most of them would want this industry to be safeguarded, but there's no industry without happy workers. There's no industry without satisfied workers, because they won't be at their optimum. Again, then it's the issue of rostering is very apex.
Apparently, that is the core issue of some of these discussions. I mean, the union was saying at some point, I spoke to some of their representatives, they were saying they're willing to come down from the 10.5 to at least 8. But there was nobody, willing to meet them halfway.
Yeah, and this takes you back to the meeting that they had on Friday, where they were hoping that at least the employer could come through, and they accused the employer of approaching this process in bad faith. So the rostering issue is apex. The union is saying that they're willing to really more or less table that, even tomorrow, table that as their initial demand. And this is something, Alicia, that does not start now. The rostering issue had already been before the CCMA. They had already gotten a certificate from the CCMA to challenge the rostering, the change in rostering by the employer. So now they're saying that, now coupled with the wages issue that is playing itself out, they would want to start there at the rostering, because the frustration starts there and then it moves into the pockets of the workers. Most of them, they're saying they're tired, and they're also looking at ensuring that these workers are prudent in what they do and they get to spend time with their families. So they're saying that that is what we're expecting for them to table tomorrow when they meet as their first and initial demand, and then that will then inform how they move here. But you're right to say that they have been skirting with 8% to say this is where we can bargain. Remember,
as long as the other operational matters.
They started at 17.5%, Alicia. They moved from 17.5 to 10.5%. Now they're willing to move from 10.5% to 8%. And this would tell you that indeed then they're willing to negotiate and bargain with the employer, but the employer as well at the same time maintaining that what they're calling for would not be feasible. It's not something that would be sustainable. And they are saying that whatever they're implementing would be in line with industry standards. And they're also, saying that these pilots are handsomely paid, that most of them really go home with a lot.
Over benefits is what they say.
Exactly. So they're actually saying that when you look at it, both parties will have to concede. They'll have to try by all means to bargain in a way that at least there'll be winners. All of them would be winners, and there are no losers here, because there's still a company that needs to be operated, going to a point, the employer of saying that if we see a prolonged strike action and this impasse continuing, this will have an impact also on the boots on the ground. So the airport, the airline can decide then to say, let's then practice a Section 185. Let's try by all means to ensure that we balance things out in the books, and that then won't bode well for the working force.
But then the strike continues while the negotiations sit tomorrow. Is that what you're confirming?
100%.
Thank you so much to SABC News senior economics reporter there, Katlego Legodi, with a report back on day 2 of the FlySafair strike by the pilots. And as you've just heard, the CCMA as well as the company FlySafair now willing to go and sit again at those negotiations starting from tomorrow.